This budget hearing conducted by the Committee on Appropriation and Adjudication will now reconvene with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. I want to thank everyone for your presence here today. As we continue the budget process for fiscal year 2019, we face overwhelming challenges due to the Trump Tax Act's impact on the government of Guam's revenue stream. Given these austere times, we find it prudent that the Committee on Appropriations have a different tone and approach to the budget hearings. The continued implication that past patterns of appropriation levels will no longer be taken as a given. Prior to this hearing, I sent a letter to each agency present today asking you to provide testimony and answering specific questions relative to your agency's missions, how you measure the achievements of your missions, and other relevant matters. In prior fiscal years, the committee had given you incremental budget approach and requested your agency justify any additional funding above your existing funding level. For this year, we are engaging in what I loosely term zero-based budgeting, which does not start from the prior year's fiscal year budget level to justify each next year's fiscal level, rather than to take a deeper look into each agency's budgets from the ground up. Given the likelihood of decreased revenues from which we fund government services for our people, we must take a closer look at each and every agency of this government and not be bound by what we have always provided in the past. The committee will be basing its decision on the future or with whatever you present today. And so you're going to have to justify every single position, and the committee will be asking numerous questions about your budget submittal to determine whether or not each and everything that you're requesting is actually necessary for your mission. The committee is going to do everything it can do to show the people of Guam that we are committed to a ground-up approach because the current fiscal environment calls for it. With that, I invite Ms. Benito to, let me introduce my colleagues. The Vice Speaker is at my far right, Senator Mary Camacho Torres, Senator Espaldon, Senator Nicholas, Senator Snagstein, and Senator Regine Bisco-Lee. And I thank them all for joining me this morning to listen to the testimony of the Department of Revenue Taxation.
Hafdi, and thank you, Speaker Cruz and members of the Committee on Appropriations and Adjudication. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Department of Revenue and Taxation's fiscal year 2019 budget request. Before I proceed, I'd like to also introduce Mr. Paul Pablo. He's our Deputy Tax Commissioner at the department. And he's here to also assist with any questions or discussions we have on the budget. The core mission of DRT is to enforce the tax laws of Guam and to collect taxes, fees, and fines as mandated by law. Inherent in its core mission is the licensing and registration, as well as other enforcement functions assigned to the department by law. The department accomplishes its mission by enforcement of the Guam territorial income tax laws, the administration and enforcement of general taxes, business license law, administration and enforcement of general corporate law, Tax Preparers Act, the administration of the real estate tax program, administration of all functions under the Vehicle Code of Guam, the Alcoholic Beverage Control Act, Tobacco Control Act, Insurance, Banking, and Securities Acts, Weights and Measures Chapter, and provide passport acceptance to collect and implement, execute passport applications. The achievement of the department's core mission is determined by the enforcement of tax laws and regulatory functions to ensure compliance. This is accomplished through the civil audit and criminal investigation branches, as well as the individual divisions, processes, and procedures. DRT has submitted its fiscal year 2019 budget in the amount of $13.9 million. The composition of this funding request is as follows: 10.9 from the general fund and $3 million from special funds. The allocation of the 13.9 will be discussed later for a thorough discussion and questions and answers. The Department of Revenue and Taxation's budget reflects the true needs of the department, particularly in personnel requirements. The increase in funding is primarily due to the need to fill vacancies that were previously unfunded due to fiscal constraints of the government of Guam. DRT's peak number of employees was 192 2 decades ago. And with the many new mandates, services, reporting requirements, increase in population, the DRT currently operates with only 147 employees. This is 45 employees less than 2 decades ago. DRT has many funding requirements. A major investment must be made for the automation of most of the manual processes currently being performed by its employees. Recognizing the government's financial situation as a result of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, DRT is compelled to operate within the funding provided and must postpone information technology improvements until funding is made available. In closing, the Department appreciates the support and commitment of this legislature to assist DRT in providing its services to the taxpaying public. And with that, I welcome the discussion and questions, and we'll try and answer it as best as we can. Thank you.
We've not had a chance to review this since you just submitted it. Do you want to go through your breakdown so that the committee, they can follow you through and so that we can address these various...
The summary of fund source?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Okay, for fund source, for fiscal year 2019, we requested from the general fund 10.9, from the Better Public Service Fund 1.6, the Tax Collection Enhancement Fund 976,000, Banking and Insurance Enforcement Fund 419,000, for a total of 13.9. Unlike 2018, the authorization was 14.1, so the difference of $176,000. The summary for FY 2019 on personnel services is 10.1, and the operations 3.8, for a total of 13.9. Again, the authorization for 2018 was 14.1. If you want to go down, executive? Okay.
Why don't you do that? These hearings are aired, and unfortunately, the listeners aren't able to read your testimony. And so if they could hear at least, though I would invite everybody to go to ofbguam.org, all the testimony will be uploaded, and all the budgets are on that website also. But just for the benefit of the listening audience, if you would, and I'm hoping that my colleagues will indulge me, but we do have a listening audience and a viewing audience that really has no opportunity to understand
you're
what
right.
we're talking about here without
You're right.
benefit of this.
So read the whole thing, even straight across 2018, everything on this.
Well, whatever, just so that they have an understanding of what we're talking about.
Okay. All right. So the narrative, okay, now we're going into the 5 divisions that you requested and executive direction. The director's office consists of the executive direction consists of the director's office, the Technical Research and Appeals Bureau, System and Programming, and Passport Office. The director's office provides executive direction, program coordination, policy development, and administrative support services. Technical Research and Appeals Bureau is tasked to resolve disputes equitably to the taxpayer and the government, provide ruling on tax issues, technical advice and information to the director, assist the Office of Attorney General in civil tax cases for litigation, hear on tax disputes, and administer the Tax Preparers Act. System and Programming provide computer support, handles daily operations that deal with the computer hardware and related equipment, assist users on software issues and problems, provide connectivity support to other agencies. The Passport Office is responsible for accepting, examining, executing the United States passport application. Director's Office, we currently have filled 5 employees, 0 vacancies, total FTE of 5. Technical Research Appeals, 2 filled, 1 vacant, and total requests would be 3, total FTE. Systems and Programming is 1 filled, 1 vacant, request for 2. That's a total of 8 for the executive direction. The general fund request for FY 2019 personnel cost for option 1 is $904,100, and the operational cost is 1.2. The authorization for 2018 was $971,266. The operational cost was 1.1. The variance of $67,166 for personnel cost, and the variance for operational cost is $115,000. The decrease in personnel is due to the retirement of a research appeals officer. The second division, tax enforcement. This consists of the criminal investigation, the tax examination, and tax collection branches. The major objective of the division is to create an environment to stimulate voluntary compliance with Guam's tax laws and to prosecute willful violators. The government of Guam cannot function without revenues to fund its operations. As taxes are a primary source of revenues, the need for the tax enforcement program continues. We currently have 6 filled, and criminal investigation is 6 filled, tax exam is 10 filled, and tax collection is 21. That's a total of 37. The vacancies for criminal investigation is 3, tax examination 7, collection is 7. Total of 17 vacant positions. And on the field, that's $2.4 million for personnel, and for the vacant, it's 801. So total between the field and vacant would be $3.2 million. The personnel cost, again, will be $3.2 million for just the tax enforcement division. FY18 was $3.6 million, and that variance is a decrease of $381,000. On the third division, that's real property tax. This division consists of the appraisal and the assessment branch. The major objective of the division is to identify, establish value, and credit tax assessment of all taxable property, land and building for the island of Guam, for an updated report of the aggregated values, establishing the annual assessment row and statements, and establishing and distributing the annual delinquent list on unpaid assessments. We currently have for the appraisal 9 filled, for the assessment 5 filled. We would like, the vacancy is 1 for appraisal and 2 for assessment. That's a total of 14 filled on the real property tax and 3 vacancies that we'd like to fill. The cost for the filled positions is about $800,000, and for the vacant, about $119,000. So the personal cost again is $913 for the total of the 17 personnel. In fiscal year 2018, the authorization was $902,000 with a variance of $11,000. The decrease in personnel reflect the pay adjustment on the Competitive Wage Act and the 3 vacated of 3 positions, 2 resignation and 1 promotion. 4, Division 4 is the taxpayer service. This division consists of the income tax branch and assistance and processing branch, electronic data processing, business privilege tax, tax accounting, and central files branch. The major objective of the division is to provide quality service, taxpayer service in a timely and efficient manner, and educate the public in tax law changes and requirements. Ensure the protection of government revenues by making tax assessments in a timely and accurate manner. Protect and improve the management of tax records. Improve the automated applications via systems program update. Work with local and federal agencies in reducing fraud, waste, and abuse in both federally funded and locally funded social assistance programs. For the field positions and income tax branch, that's 10 filled electronic data processing. 4, business privilege tax. 3, tax accounting. 6, central file. 6. The vacant for these branches are income tax 1, electronic data processing 2, business privilege tax 2, tax, and for a total of 5. So on the filled position on taxpayer service, it's 29 positions at 1.5 million. On the vacant that we're requesting is 241, 5 vacant for 241,000, and that'll be a total of 1.8. So for fiscal year 2019, we're requesting for 1.8 million for the personnel costs. 2018, the authorized was 1.8, with a variance of 10,000. The decrease in personnel is due to the retirement of 2 supervisors, 2 promotions, and 1 transfer. Number 5, division, regulatory. The regulatory division consists of the insurance, securities and banking, and real estate, the compliance branch, the general licensing and registration, and weights and measures. The major objective of the division is to monitor the solvency and safety of all financial institutions that are licensed to transact business in Guam, to ensure that business activities in Guam have appropriate business license, to ensure that all customers are protected by targeted inspections of business establishments for compliance with safe and fair business practices, to enable electronic licensing process on insurance and most classes of licensing and activities like UCC filing, assigned risk processing, surplus lines placement, real estate, appraiser, banking, foreign exchange, and securities licensing. For this division, the regulatory, for the filled positions, insurance and banking is at 7. We have 7 positions. Compliance, we have 3. General licensing is 6, weights and measures is 3 for a total of 19, and that's at 1.2 million. The vacant positions for insurance and banking is 2, compliance is 7, general licensing is 1, total of 10 for an amount of 483,000. That equates to 1.6 million that we're requesting for personal costs for FY 2019. The FY 2018 authorization was 1.3, and the variance of 336, with an increase of 24.9%. The increase in personnel is due to the mandatory recruitment of 4 Compliance Inspector 1 and 1 Compliance Inspector 2, as authorized by Public Law 34042. The 6th division is motor vehicle. The motor vehicle division consists of the driver's license examination, vehicle registration, and motor carrier safety assistance program. The major objective of the division is to provide the public with the highest quality of service by ensuring the fair and impartial applications of the vehicle code to reduce the processing time of vehicle registration, certificate of ownership, driver's license, and ID cards, reducing the number of non-fatal crashes related to commercial motor vehicle by instilling voluntary compliance with the vehicle code and the federal motor carrier safety regulations and the hazardous materials regulations, to safeguard all information maintained at MVD, Motor Vehicle Division, and to meet the challenge of a growing number of motor vehicle and drivers. Right now, at driver's license, we have 4 filled, vehicle registration 8 filled, and the motor carrier is 5, with a total of 17 filled for 653. And then we have the vacant position at driver's license of 6, 4 at vehicle registration, 1 at motor carrier, gives us a total of 11 for 424,000. So combined, filled and vacant would be 1 million. So for FY 2019, personnel costs for motor vehicle, we're requesting the 1.1 million. As compared to FY 2018, the variance was only 4,783, and the decrease in personnel is due to the retirement of the motor vehicle administrator. So on the special fund, we have 11 filled, And then if we go to the operational costs for FY 2019, personnel cost is at $91,737. Travel off island is $13,500. Contractual services is at $36,123. Supplies and materials is at $10,000. Telephone toll is $125,000. A total of $484,623. And the total was $976,360.
Okay, I think probably
Yeah.
we can
Okay,
dispense with the rest of it.
thanks.
When you initially read your testimony, you talked about the fact that there was 20 years ago there was 192,
Correct.
and now we're at 145.
Yes.
And the way it was presented, it sounded like this legislature had not, and I underline that, had not provided you with sufficient funds to fill those vacancies.
Due to funding, correct. The governor.
Appropriations. This legislature appropriated sufficient funds for the operations of the department. I'm going to take you through this so the listening audience can understand that. Let's go back to the first division, the executive direction. In that, you claim that there are 5 vacancies that you wish to fill. No, 2. 2 vacancies you wish to fill, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Executive direction at the top of the page. There's 2 vacancies that you want to fill there,
Right.
and 1 vacancy in system programming and 1 vacancy in technical. You want to fill 5 positions. You put a $sign there as opposed to the 5. No, I'm correct. No, I'm 2. That's right. You just want to fill 2. But you claim that that's going to cost you $117,000.
Correct.
How much was your appropriation for 2018? The difference would be for the 2 people that you want to pick up there, right? That's the only place that the legislature did not provide sufficient funds for personnel. Because if you look at the difference in operational costs for option 1 and last year's authorization, it's $115,000, which coincidentally is pretty close to the cost for those 2 additional people. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we go to tax enforcement, which everybody outside in the public has been most concerned about because of the collection of taxes and the leakage that we're suffering. In there, you're asking to pick up 17 additional people. Correct. Is that correct?
Yes,
correct. To fill the vacancies. That's going to cost you $800,000. Did this legislature provide you sufficient appropriation authorization to fill those positions last year?
Well, this is over last year, resignation. So those are what happened. It's not the legislature's doing, but because of resignation, retirement, and then the public law, and then the funding, we didn't have the funds to hire these people because of the tax cut. And
okay, but please,
I mean,
I want it understood that last year, before the tax cut,
right? You
how
did
much
authorize.
how much did we authorize in appropriation for this division?
3.6.
How much are you asking for this year to fill those 17 positions? How much are you asking for this year?
801,000.
No, you're asking for 3.2.
No, that's the total. So for the vacant positions, it's 800,000.
I understand.
Combined is 3.2. Yes.
Yeah, for the total, you're asking for 3.2.
Correct.
At the risk of sounding absolutely ludicrous, but I want to do this. Is that greater or less than the appropriation you got last year?
Less.
So last year, did this legislature provide you with sufficient
Yes.
funds to fill
Yes.
all those positions?
Yes, yes.
So is there any excuse for tax enforcement not being fully manned?
No, right now, the issue is, at the time, you did fund us. At the time, we could not hire them because of the tax cuts, so
The tax cuts was 3 months ago.
that was in January.
October.
So
yeah.
everything was in motion. DOA.
So you lost 17 people in the last year?
No, some of that is because of the 36 that you authorized for us to hire. So while we were doing that in the process in January, everything was frozen because of the tax cut. So we're continuing to hire them. In fact, this has changed because just last week.
You say we authorized 36.
Right.
How are you going to be able to pick up 17 people, additional people with less money? Didn't this legislature provide you with enough people to pick up 54 people?
Yes, last budget, correct.
So this legislature gave you enough money.
Yes.
So it's not this legislature's fault
it's
that
not.
you are short.
Right, no.
And I want to walk this through because I want it clear in the public that this legislature did not shortchange you.
No.
So we'll
Absolutely.
go to the next division.
Okay.
In property tax.
And in fact, Mr. Speaker, when we did this budget, this was in January. As of that time, we've already conducted interviews. We already hired five revenue agents. But at the time that we submitted this budget, that wasn't in there. So we've already started to hire the 5 revenue agents.
I know. All I'm trying to do is to get the listening the public to understand.
Right.
It was not this legislature.
No, it
the same
wasn't.
thing is true
Understood.
in taxpayer services, where we've provided you with enough people to fill all the vacancies. And why don't you just make an overall statement? The vacancies that you currently have are because a cash shortage, but not an appropriation shortage from this legislature.
Yes.
And the cash shortage was exacerbated by the Trump Tax Act, but the thing is that you also need to should have filled all of those positions throughout the year to make sure that you didn't have a leakage problem.
Right. So I did. Did you want to say something?
If I can just add, Speaker Cruz, what the acting director is saying is, yes, you did. The last year's budget, the legislature did appropriate the amount the department was asking for. And some of these vacancies that we're requesting to fill were still part of what was requested in the last budget. In fact, even today, as the acting director mentioned, we're actually holding interviews. These last 2 weeks, we were holding interviews to fill some of these vacancies that were even authorized last fiscal year. Some of them that we're filling are due to resignations, promotions, and some are new hires also. But to answer your question, yes, what you provided last fiscal year that was requested by them was provided through appropriation.
It was provided, and like in regulatory, you want to fill 10 vacancies there, and we provided, the legislature provided enough money for you guys to do that.
Yes, yes.
Please get it on the record so that because this just galls the... And then to assist in motor vehicles, we provided special funding for additional people.
You did. And that right now is also being, at the time that this was all going on, we were revising the application, the requirement, the PD. That's what I meant to say, the PD. So right now they're going to start opening the positions in the next week or two for those areas.
And so the one thing that I want to get clear to the listening public and to my colleagues is that this legislature, this committee, provided the Department of Revenue and Taxation with all the agents that it needed and additional agents that you guys did not fill because of whatever problems you have with moving people through Department of Administration or getting the sufficient cash. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. This is just pro forma, but department be able to operate under the option 2 budget?
Option 2, okay. We were working.
Your governor provided a executive budget request with 2 options, 1 and 2. The 2 is with the 10% cut. The 1 is the one that you're asking for in your testimony.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to get on the record that you would not be able to operate on yours.
Correct. That is so correct. Thank you.
Under option 1, the department has several items under contractual services that are not funded in option 2. Can you explain each of the following items and then comment on why these items should be funded, given your option 2 budget request does not include these? The FAST EGBS point-to-point DOA data, $12,000.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. The option 2. We've just been working based off the option 1 because, like you said, we cannot operate on the option 2, so I don't have that data.
So I have about 10 items that you did not have on your option 2, but is on option 1, and all I need for you to explain why it's necessary, so that we can fund it. I try to explain to everybody that though I'm saying zero-based budgeting, my staff and everybody has told me, Google it, it's not zero-based budgeting that you're doing.
Okay.
All right? What I'm doing is something that I was trained when I was at the court. You present your testimony about everything that you need. And attorneys and people watching, the media when they're watching court proceedings, don't understand why at the very beginning one of the first questions is, was the crime committed on Guam? And was it committed on such and such a date? If the prosecution fails to ask those 2 very basic questions, when they close at the end of their presentation, there can be a motion to dismiss because it wasn't shown that it wasn't testified to that it was done on Guam and what the date was. So what I'm trying to do is trying to help you go through option 1 and option 2, okay, so that when this committee decides that it's going to fund these things, there is a rationale for it. It's not just, I woke up this morning on the right side of the bed and decided to give you something, or I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and decided not to. So
Sure.
Please help me
Okay.
justify what these things are and why option 1 has them, but option 2 doesn't, which at least when it's presented to us means that you could have done without it because that was what was sent down to us.
Oh, well, you know what, when we do the option 2, it's not that we could have done without, I mean, what it is prioritizing. So whatever that was, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but whatever it was, it's something that we need, but we'll somehow manage. We have to come up with how can we help, say, cut costs. So they're all priority. It's just which one is more or less
I just
of
need
the
for you
priority.
to put on the record why these things are important and why this legislature should continue to fund it. We've been very generous with revenue tax. There were years that I tried to give you an attorney that you guys never filled. I mean, last year we gave you 12 people you didn't ask for because
Yes.
we're trying to help collect.
Yes.
Because I recognize that if you don't collect, I have nothing to appropriate from here.
Correct.
So I'm trying to help you. Now just help me help you.
Sure, and we
Okay?
appreciate it.
All right. What is this FAST EGBPS point-to-point DOL to DOA data of 12,000?
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to have to get back to you on that.
Is this to get Department of I don't understand the acronyms that are being used.
Is that for $1,000?
$12,000
Okay, $12,000.
from the Tax Collection and Enhancement Fund, a fast eGBSP point-to-point DOL to DOA data. What is that?
It's probably one of our contracts with DOA, with our system. I'm going to have to get back to you on that so I can get a real confirmed answer.
Well, then I'm going to have to send you a letter with all of these because there's a question for a $35,000 firewall technical assistance support.
Senator, if I can add to that. I'm sorry, if I can add to that, probably OTEC would answer a lot of these questions that are related to IT and the software contractual services. But if I can speculate, I remember there was a point in time that Department of Labor was looking at tax credit programs that they were trying to do. These were targeted tax credit programs for disadvantaged workers, and they were trying to obtain some data from us so they can move that and work with that program. I'm not sure if that specifically relates to that, but off the top of my head, that's the only thing I can think of at this point.
Well, no, I'm glad you're attempting to talk to each other because ever since I've been to this legislature, I have been completely befuddled by the inability of your department to talk to Department of Administration. I mean, I can't believe that. Your systems don't interface, do they?
I'm sorry, our system of DOA?
Does the DOA system and the DRT system interface?
Yes, it's just that they're separate and standalone, so they have to input on another system for rev and tax data. But they do interface. We're working right now to make it completely to the way it was back then, and those are all issues that we're trying to fix because of that. The merchant contract way back in 2010 actually. It started in 2010. That's how this whole thing developed. And unfortunately, we're picking up the pieces. We're still trying to fix it, but we're getting closer to merging the two together. So, but they do talk. There is one system at the front line of Treasurer of Guam that goes directly into rev and tax.
Yes. And you guys are saved this morning because of your inability to respond on time. And the delay in your response to the OPA has made it so that the OPA couldn't issue the two audits. Otherwise, this would be a fun hearing this morning, even better than what just happened, I assure you. But we've got to start getting systems that can talk to each other. Department of Land Management, I mean, they were at least willing to admit yesterday that there were problems with their getting data to you and you guys understanding things. But I think I'm going to have to write a letter to you, and I'm going to insist today that I not have to wait 3 weeks for responses. Is that clear? Or a month?
And I believe I responded timely when I found out about it.
When you found out about it.
Yes.
But it was almost 2 weeks after I had written to you guys to find out what was going to happen with the tax stamp meeting that you had on the 10th.
Yes, you're right.
And you need to start responding in a more timely fashion.
Yes, I agree. And
so I'm going to be submitting most of these questions to you since trying to read them and you probably wouldn't understand them. And I'm going to be expecting answers. Otherwise, as and I would tell you this publicly, I don't get a response to each individual item on this with a detailed response, it's not going to be funded. The committee needs to know whether or not all of these things are necessary, so please respond. I'll let the others ask questions. I'll start with the Vice Speaker and then the Oversight Chair. It's all right. I'll read it just so you understand. They're not able to understand it. I'm not sure how we're going to be. Just so that you go. A, fast EB GBS PS point-to-point DOL to DOA data 12,000 via tax collection enhancement fund. Firewall technical support 35,000 TCEF. GPAS interface to DLM system 29,000. Interfaces for the GPAS system via BPSF. Maintenance and repair services for security access via TCEF. Power 7 hardware and software support maintenance of 75,000. I understand, and that's why I'm saying it's maybe we're going to need to get this in writing and responded to in writing, because my trying to read it to you. Let me go through some of the positions that you want to fill. In the Tax Enforcement Division, you have current staffing patterns submitted with your budget request. You cite 22 positions that are funded but vacant. These include 1 Assistant Tax Investigator, 4 Tax Compliance Inspector 1s, and 1 Compliance Inspector 2, 7 Revenue Agent 1s and 6 Revenue Agent 1s, 1 Revenue Agent 2, and 2 Tax Investigator 1 positions, totaling $1 million. All of these positions are currently funded under the FY18, but are cited as vacant in your current staffing pattern. Given that most of these positions are vacant in the current staffing pattern submitted by DRT, can DRT operate in its current service level without these positions funded in FY19?
It's going to be very difficult, Mr. Speaker, but I would say no. We'd prefer that we hire those positions.
And how long have they been vacant?
I'm sorry?
How long have they been vacant?
Some is months.
How many of them are years?
We're trying to promote as we go along. Months, maybe 6 to 8 months they've been vacant. Because we've been hiring.
In your staffing pattern, it shows that it's been vacant for longer than that.
Well, I know that we had recent resignations, so as they're resigning, we're also submitting GG1s to pick them up.
I'm going to have to just do this in writing, because I'm going to insist that every question be answered, because I'm not getting sufficient answers right now. Who wishes to pose questions? Vice Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ms. Benito. Just wanted to, overall, the presentation is that you're asking for less than what you were given in FY 2018. You are filling less personnel than what was authorized in 2018, especially notably in the Tax Enforcement Division. And I guess that's what's not making sense to us or me. It's asking for less when you say you need all these employees in order to collect more for us.
Right. Well, we're asking for 47 additional positions. So
47 in addition to what was authorized in 2018?
If I might insist,
yes.
Vice Speaker, all of these vacancies were funded in 2018.
Right.
Yes.
They've not filled them.
Correct.
And so the problem is, you'll see that their request for 19 is actually less than 18. But the thing is that they'll be able to fill all of these positions even with the amount that they're asking for, which is less, because we gave them more than they needed last year, and they still haven't filled all the positions. It's not this legislature that neglected them.
Yes,
They've
you're right.
been unable to get DOA and to fill the positions.
Yes, unfortunately,
At the end, if you get the budget you want, all those positions that you need are going to be filled. That's your testimony this morning?
Yes.
And that our tax collection is going to be up to par in your estimation?
Yes, this will definitely help our
Yeah, but
collection enforcement, yes.
I guess I want to know, I always wanted to know, what do you mean by help? I mean, what are the goals and how were these positions intended to reach that goal? And do you still believe that this is the correct allocation of positions? For example, I'm confused about this motor vehicle vacancies that you want to fill now.
Yes.
When you've already opened up a new motor vehicle office here in the
Right.
Agana Shopping Center with employees, but yet you're saying today that we still need more employees in that division?
Okay, those employees, the reason for that is because those employees are just LTAs. If we don't have any funding, they could go at any time. So these are permanent classified positions that we need to fill. And yes, it was authorized, it was funded last fiscal year, last appropriation, but unfortunately, again, funding is an issue when it was an issue like in January, so at the time everything was frozen.
All right, so then,
But we do have the GG1s, we were rolling out the GG1s and getting it ready.
okay. So then my only other question is, so which division here is in charge of this tax, what's that new program where the abatement of, or the relief, the tax relief
The Amnesty
program, the Amnesty program?
Okay,
Yes.
that'd be collection branch.
Collections, and while they're processing that, what happens with other collection, their regular duties, I guess?
Yes. So they do look at the application, and as the taxpayers are coming in, they still try and maintain their workload, but at the same time, they're also entertaining the taxpayers with the amnesty because, they want to come in, what amount do I owe? But hopefully the annual notice that we send out, that would help them also. But the cases that they're working on, or the amnesty program, are cases that are existing, that they're already holding. So as they come in, they're entertaining that, so basically that is their tax case.
All right. And so then, sorry, just one more. When you vacate a position and because of promotion, we don't need to fill some of these. It kind of looks like we don't need to fill those.
Yes,
anymore.
yes, please, because then that's one less person in that branch, although they probably move to another branch. Promotion could be within the branch or to another division.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Benito, Acting Director, I'm trying to understand why you want to go with option one, and I can understand in a way why you're going to go to option one and why option two is offered. When you're the agency that brings in all the money, I think everybody here would like to hear that you want to maintain your same budget of last year, not go less, because if you're going to keep expressing, you can probably work with it, but it's not a preferred method. I'm looking at your letter. I'm just going to generally go down real quick on it. Tax enforcement. You have 3 vacancy on criminal investigation. Is that part of the 4 authorized? What is the authorization to start with before 2018 in CIB? Because CIB, if I'm correct, got 5 people. So you got 6. You were authorized 4. Am I correct on the 2018?
Yes, correct.
So 5 and 4 is 9 would come up. And you got 3 more to go. And then tax examination, you've got 10. You got 7 vacancy. Is that part of the 10 that was authorized by budget?
Yes, the 10.
And you only filled 3?
No, 10 is the existing, and then the 7, 5 of them is from the law that allowed us, I forgot what that law was, but 5 of those vacant has been interviewed and will possibly be just waiting for selection process But
Okay.
the 10 is prior. The vacant is from the law and then promotion or resignation.
10 is
It's filled.
your current.
Yes.
What was your total authorization examination? I'm just try not to nip on it too much, Ms. Benito, but I'm trying to be very careful is that as we ask you to make sure you're doing audits, you're doing examination of people that are doing all the things they do on taxes and even in collection, I'm trying to see the rationale is why you want to reduce. Is this something that downtown is actually saying, these are your options, you need to go this way because we don't have enough money, but at the same time, turn to you and say to you and to Mr. Paul, you need to go out there and collect, but that we're not going to give you anybody to do it. Is that what we're hearing? Because on this side of the street, we're saying go and collect.
Yes.
Here are the positions you need to fill. We gave you 30, the legislature authorized you 36 positions.
No, we authorized 54.
Or 54. And we had a discussion last year before we approved the budget that DOA said you would be able to hire within 30 days. It's been now, I just ignore what happened with the Trump. You had 3 good months. You should have filled more than half of it. I know Mr. Poe is probably saying, I wish we did. But I'm just concerned is that, and you brought up, you have LTAs. And Senator Talai said, you've got a new satellite. You need the position. Where are you getting the funding for LTAs and you're not allowed to hire classified positions? That's what I'm trying to understand. Is that money drawn from the same pot at revenue and tax? And if it's not, or if it is, then it needs to be funneled to your vacancies.
Right. We do have another funding that funds all of these.
No, do you have a separate funding for LTAs?
No, not a separate, not just for that. No. We have the ACTC funding that we also get that funds these vacancies also.
Yeah, but how come they're not hired? 9 months later, Ms. Benito, I'm trying, as the oversight chair, I'm trying to work with you. I'm trying to convince my colleagues we need to help you. We need to get more money in. We need to get this tax stamp, tobacco stamp going. There's a bunch of stuff.
Okay.
I mean, we came to an agreement about the e-filing. I introduced that. We got to worry about the Real ID Act coming up. Everything is going to be on the back burner until Department of Taxation shows the light on the end of the tunnel. Because if you keep asking for reduction in your appropriation, how are you going to collect? You can't. How do we expect to avoid the violations going on with the short-term rental, the Airbnb, the underground tour guides out there? And Mr. Paul knows where I'm coming from because I work for him.
Yes.
I work for both of you, but I'm trying to figure out how do you want to convince us at the legislature to give you less and you're not able to do really what you need to do? Is it maybe you need to be autonomous or what? What is the requirements to get the Department of Revenue and Tax to do what it needs to do?
Yes.
That's what I like to know. And I think my colleagues would like to hear that.
I really appreciate that, Senator. Absolutely. What we're going to do is with that 47 positions that we're opening, that will absolutely help our workload right now, help implement all those tax changes, all those laws that's been passed.
So
work with
option
rules and regs.
1 and 2 is not on the table then. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
We're only working with option 1. Option 2, yeah, that's not on the table. I can't do without most of these things, or 99% of it. So we're only looking at option 1, and hiring 47 more people would definitely help the department, help us move all these programs forward. The law that you just implemented or just introduced on the GRT, the BPT, that is one of the best that we've been asking for many years.
But Ms. Benito,
BPT.
option 1 gives you 45 more people? 47 more?
47. Yes.
And everything I've seen here was a negative on your write-up? You want less for tax enforcement? You want less for driver's motor vehicle?
Less. This is what he's talking about.
You want less pretty much everywhere, except for the director's office. So how do you want to get
This is
less
just,
and
again,
survive?
Senator, this is just on the general fund. So the 47 positions are strictly on the general fund.
Yes, and whatever happened to the ALCO server program money?
Yes, that.
That's almost $500,000.
That is huge, and I really, I'm looking forward to that. They're reconciling that right now with DOA and Edmund, our chief of admin, because there's supposed to be money in there for ABC to hire more people, do its job, resources, vehicles, equipment. So right now they're reconciling that fund, and hopefully we'll get some of that. They desperately need vehicles over there, and we're waiting for that to happen.
I would just request, Ms. Minnie, too, that you take a look at the budget, and I would only recommend that you scrap 1, scrap 2, stay status quo, because if you get less, the demand will just be higher, and you're not going to get any more because you asked for less. And when I meet with Mr. Paul up there, and he goes, "We need more money," I says, "No, you only asked for less, work with less," and that's how we end up being. I'm just asking you, don't ask for less, because the demand will be greater this year. Okay? I'm just giving you fair warning. The tobacco stamp, the e-filing, everything is going to come on you, folks. And you'll probably say, "We need more money." You keep asking for less, the demand is going to get greater. Okay? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here this morning. In your response to Senator San Agustin, you were mentioning that what you're discussing and the decreases are only in your general fund request. So could you tell me a little bit about maybe what percentage or what percentage of your budget is derived from federal funds or other sources?
Well, on the motor carrier division, that is funded by the, federal grant. Yes, that's $350,000 from the federal grant. So that's not from the general fund. And then again, some of those positions, the FTE positions that are already current are paid by ACTC fund, another revolving fund.
Will you be needing funding to match? Are any of these, like, they have to be matched with the general fund in order for you to realize these federal grants?
Fortunately, no. It's 100% federal grant.
Okay. Can you also, Ms. Benito, I hear from a lot of constituents, a lot of taxpayers, a lot of small businesses, just their frustrations in doing business with DRT, that they waste a lot of their time, it's very inefficient, is what I hear from them. I think we've had improvements over the last few months in driver's license, and we're not waiting as long, so I want to, congratulate you on that and ask you to continue to really push for making it more efficient on that side. But in terms of training, I know we're having issues with you even filling these positions, but with the positions that are filled, how often are these individuals, are these full-time employees trained and maybe tested in what it is that they do every day to increase efficiency?
Okay, that's a very good question. On the training, it's normally just on their initial employment. They train them on the job, and then, as they go along, of course, the supervisor's there to guide them. However, on the tax side, they have to be trained every year on the changes, and then they have revenue officer training, revenue agent. So that is ongoing. There's several trainings for revenue agent. For example, there's, I think, 3 units or 4 units, and maybe Paul can elaborate on that, but we do train on the tax side. And on the other regulatory sides, it's initially on the job when they first start, and then as they go along, the supervisor's there for guidance.
And what percentage of your budget details training?
Right now, I'm sorry, hold on, let me go to the training.
If I can mention specifically training, there was nothing mentioned on the budget with training. I know the acting director was working with downtown to look at seeking some grant money from DOI, technical assistance, to provide training. You know, what we've done is we've looked at IRS and we've asked them how we can get their assistance in providing training. They used to send revenue agents or revenue officers to serve as the lead instructors, but a lot of that has changed over time. They've moved into training using the computer. And so when they have new hires, their new hires are trained that way. That's been the challenge for us. But, you know, overall today, Senators, just to kind of recap and to hear some of the concerns that have been said, all the positions that are being asked for in today's budget request, they're required. They're not a luxury. They're not something that Revenue Tax just wants to fill, you know, positions for the sake. Without these positions, and I know you want more answers, and we'll get that to you.
No, but I think you should be clear, Paul.
Yes.
These positions were funded.
I did mention that.
And you did not fill them.
And I was coming to that, Senator. The reason.
Get that clear.
Absolutely. And let me mention some of the challenges that we're hearing day to day, exactly why they're not filled. We're just getting just this May, we're seeing UOG graduate. And we're trying to find out how many of them would be interested in working for Revenue Tax. Well, let me tell you some of the feedback I'm hearing from our supervisors. When you look at the entry level, like a revenue agent one and an accountant one, there's a disparity in the pay for the same requirement, an accounting degree. And we're wondering, you know, how to remedy some of these things that changed in the CWA. They're impacting our ability to hire not only people to fill it, but people that have the propensity to be trained and to have the basic skills. They're going to the OPA, they're going to DOA, they're going to autonomous agencies. And I'll tell you honestly, Senator, it is a challenge for us, and we're trying to rectify that.
But whose responsibility is that? Does the legislature write those job descriptions, or do you guys write those job descriptions and get them cleared? Is that an executive or a legislative function?
It's with the CWA, Senator. We're not faulting the...
Which is what? An executive function, correct? We just approve it.
I agree with you, Senator.
Every single one of them goes in and asks each person to write their job description and the CWA, and you explain why you're going to get what you do. Because I remember when I was at the court, my human resource people were able to fill out those questionnaires, and they got paid more than my attorneys. You guys need to rewrite those and get it approved. It's not from here. Senator, that was the same thing that I had with the OPA. She complained about
Senator,
hers.
I'm not saying that they're from
the legislature. I know,
but
I think you just need to get it clear to the public that it is not a legislative function to rewrite those job descriptions.
I'm not saying that that's what needs to happen. The job description doesn't need to be rewritten. I think it's the interpretation of how those classifications were made. And being specific, before several months ago, when I took a look at the difference, what's an accountant one and a revenue agent one, both of them said they required an accounting degree. But here's the way the write-up went. The accounting degree for an accountant one said you needed 24 credits of either basic or advanced accounting, 24 credits. If you look at the revenue agent one, it says you need 18 credits of advanced. And I think just looking at an objective standpoint, the way the pay disparity happened, they just looked at the numbers, perhaps, and said, that's why we're going to make the pay different. So I'm not here to fault.
Who wrote those?
I'm not sure, Senator. I'm going to guess it was the people who did the Hay study or the competitive wage study.
People before you wrote those job descriptions within your department. It wasn't written by any legislator.
I didn't say
make
it
sure,
was.
I understand. But when you're making that complaint, it sounds to the listening audience that it was the fault of the legislature that wrote those descriptions that way. Those are an executive function, Senator, and should be done by the executive.
I apologize if that's what you're thinking I'm saying. I'm giving you the actual reasons of the challenges we're having in hiring.
And Mr. Pablo,
and so why don't you rewrite them?
Mr. Pablo, I'm just going to interrupt you really quickly and just we understand that these are the challenges, but you also have to understand our position. We were here about a year ago having this exact same discussion and talking about these exact same positions. And we had Ms. Benito and Mr. Camacho come before us and promise us that these positions would be filled within a 60 to 90 day period. And we also asked if we had people that are waiting in the wings, trained people. We asked all of those questions. And we were promised that these positions would be filled within 60 to 90 days. Ms. Benito is shaking her head in agreement because that's what the conversation went like. And so 60 to 90 days has now turned into 9 months. And you can appreciate our challenge and our frustration on this side because it's just not happening. And
I think the 60 to 90 days is, how can I say, it's unrealistic assumption.
well, yeah, hindsight is 2020, and that's
but what I'm trying to get at, senators, and again, I'm not trying to say that you didn't provide the department with appropriation. I'm here today. I wasn't here last budget hearing. So if you're asking some of the reasons why, I'm giving you the honest answer, and it's not supporting the acting director's position. We're here today to tell you we need these positions, not even to provide you with effective tax administration, but just the bare bones to make it work. And can we make it work and start improving? I'm sure with your support by allowing us to do electronic filing or other things to change the law that help us to improve tax administration, we can do that. But like I said, some of the things that that you were asked, that was being asked for today, probably are better answered by OTEC, like for example the computer contractual portion. I apologize, we weren't here to answer for that. We were here to tell you what the department was about in general. The basic needs of the department haven't changed. Our requirement to refund, to make assessments, to bill taxpayers, all of that, the mission is still there. And sometimes we're left with people who've retired. So when you look at maybe some of the decreases, and it says it there, it's because that high-paid retiree, the person who occupied the position's still necessary, but it was probably making $4,000 or $5,000 more. And the difference isn't a vast difference of what you're saying in the budgeted amount. It's not something that's, we could come in and ask for $30 million. Realistically, would we get it, even if we substantiated all of that? I doubt it. And I think the advantage that Ms. Benito and Mr. Camacho do when they serve a dual role of being on the fiscal team is they're there to look at balancing what the general fund agencies can do with, so they can operate and provide that service to the government. You have provided us with what they asked for last year. Unfortunately, the 30 to 60 days, that was probably, it was a nice idea to agree to, but
Mr. Paul, that was testified to under oath.
I understand, and even if it was...
We can't just come in here and wash our hands whenever we feel like it.
No, but
and you know what's the
Senator...
frustrating part about this job, Mr. Paul, having been here for 6 years, is having to hear this over and over again. When is the hand washing going to stop, and the oaths actually going to matter, and the accountability actually going to be held? Hold on a second, because the constant message that we're getting at this point is you guys need to hire, and you still have that authorization.
Okay, Senator.
And so
what I'm saying is, you interrupted me when I was talking. Can I just humbly interrupt you because I didn't finish?
We'll have order. Both. Stop. He will speak. This is the legislature.
I understand.
The problem that we are having is not a legislative problem. It's not an appropriations problem. It's an administration problem. So don't come here and testify to your budget saying you guys need these things when you already were given them. Why aren't they being provided by the agencies at DOA, or why aren't the funds being released by BBMR? We're constantly told that when you hire more revenue agents, you're able to bring in more money and it solves more of the collection problems. Why aren't you guys fixing this on the administration side? It's not an appropriation problem. It's not an authorization problem. It's something that's frustrating everybody up here, because this was not even a year ago when, under oath, your director testified that these positions will be filled if we provide the funding. And the funding was provided in the appropriation. So why isn't the money being prioritized to hire for these positions so that we can bring in the hard cash to fill the shortfalls?
I was just trying to explain to you, Senator, the difficulty in hiring the people. Some of these facts are attributed to that. for the pay scale is different. And that's what I'm saying. Even right now, we have revenue officers. The time has changed where maybe the skill level of requirement where we need to revisit the position descriptions, maybe the time is now. And I'm just offering that as real reasons why this hasn't happened. Now, as far as whether, actual appropriations, monies were transferred to hire them, the process in itself, and you hear it from other agencies, it takes a long time. And we wish we could just, send out open an announcement and not even wait. Maybe it's time that legislation, happens so we can shorten all those periods. Maybe that would help us hire.
But why is all that the opposite of what is testified to by your director under oath when we're doing the budget?
Honestly, Senator, I can't explain why the 30 to 60...
Did your director lie under oath that he would be able to fill those in 90 days? Because you're obviously very adamant that that was a fantasy.
I can't speak for him.
Well, if I can just add, and possibly, it's not that he lied. That's our intent. When we do the GG1, we send it down.
The testimony was not we intend to hire. The testimony was we will be able to fill those positions within 90 days.
And yes, like I said.
And the director of administration was sitting right next to him on the same panel, the gentleman who's responsible for doing the hiring.
Yes.
So is everybody lying during the budget under oath?
So here
we are.
Because
here you are today, totally adamant that that's something that's impossible. And if you're their subordinate, then obviously your boss should have known better.
Nobody was intentionally lying. Let me just take that. What happened was when you approved that budget, of course we want to hire them immediately. But does it ever work out that way? Almost never, only because there's a process. So yes, you approved it on paper.
So if that's the reality, then they were lying because obviously they knew better, but they were making an exception just to get the appropriation and then be able to perhaps move those monies elsewhere?
Senator?
No.
You can't tell me that it never happens, but that's what they wanted to do, and then that's what they testified to, and then it just wasn't the reality.
Again, Senator, appropriation, that's on paper. What's really actual cash? Can we move those monies around? That's where we have to,
But the whole point of filling those
make
vacancies,
sure the money's available
the whole point of
before we
filling
hire.
these particular vacancies was to bring in that cash to fill those shortfalls. And that's why this is so frustrating, because it's supposed to happen at this agency, no other agency. And so when everyone's sitting up there saying they're going to come together, they're going to hire to fill these positions, if you just give us the appropriation, and then those positions are supposed to bring in that cash, only to come to find out today that it never happened and, we just didn't get the cash to do it. Well, that was the whole point to begin with.
Well, it never happened. We already hired some. Some are already on the interview process right now. It's happening.
Out of the 54 positions that was authorized by the budget chairman, how many were hired?
Out of that,
you said earlier 5.
I'm sorry, I had something. Yes, 5 already. That's just for the revenue agent. And then we hired criminal investigation. Collections. Collection is right now in the selection process. I'm sorry, I had that paper. But it's continuing. So.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may just emphasize why this is so important. We have GMH coming in here saying we need to raise sales taxes because they're short. We have DOE wanting a sales tax increase because they're short. But when we don't have these people in these positions and the collections aren't coming in, we're not bringing in the top line revenues that's supposed to go specifically to those agencies. The business privilege tax is short. And the top line of the business privilege tax is supposed to go into the pharmaceutical fund to fund GMH. We have records showing that tobacco taxes aren't being collected at the rate that they're supposed to have been. And tobacco taxes are supposed to go into the Healthy Futures Fund, a portion of which is supposed to go and fund GMH. When we don't have the agents collecting these monies and bringing them into the object categories that they're supposed to, the top line revenue doesn't get to GMH. And then you guys send GMH down here to testify that they need a sales tax increase because they don't have any money, when you're not hiring the agents who are supposed to bring in those monies that go specifically to those agencies. Same goes for DOE, the property tax, and the Territorial Educational Facilities Fund. And so what happens when you come in and you promise you're going to hire in 90 days and you don't 9 months later? The cash doesn't come in into those specific object categories, and then those agencies come in here and say, we're short, raise the sales tax. And that's why the hiring for those positions is so important, and the conversation is so frustrating, because the appropriation was provided, the administration chose not to fund those positions, put the money elsewhere, and at the end of the day, the agents aren't bringing in the revenues for those particular taxes, and the agencies aren't getting the funding, and now we're coming in here and we're being told to raise a sales tax. And who suffers? Are people. And at this level, we're giving everything for you guys to be able to resolve those problems, and yet this administration, the same fiscal team, who under oath can't even be honest about whether they can hire in 90 days, that same fiscal team comes here and says, we need a sales tax, there's no other way. That is just too much. And there's really nothing to add, because that's exactly how this has played out over this last year. And that's a trend that I've seen over these last 6 years. And the only people who are suffering are the people of Guam. So it needs to stop.
Excuse me, Senator, would you like me? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we were talking a little bit about training. I wanted to speak to you a little bit about communications, both external I wanted to ask you about your external communications. In part of the tax enforcement section and taxpayer service, you indicated that the major objectives of those two divisions are to educate the public in tax law changes and requirements, and also to create an environment of voluntary compliance. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain to us how you're doing that. How are you stimulating an environment of voluntary compliance?
The voluntary compliance is, as taxpayers either call or come in, we can assist or educate them in their tax filing requirements, and also the outreach programs that we have with exam and all those other agencies. We do the outreach through these measures, the taxpayers calling in, or even the compliance. Is there other, can you add?
If I can just add, can I speak? Thank you, Senator. With respect to voluntary compliance, the way the department operates is twofold, one with tax service and tax enforcement. The tax service division's role is to ensure that the public, and it's incumbent on any tax system, even what's imposed in the United States, that taxpayers voluntarily file their tax returns. So they know their requirements, IRS educates them, puts it out there, and as the tax law changes, they inform the taxpayers and provide them with forms so they can file. The enforcement side of the house now are for those who choose either to intentionally or willfully avoid, or they have just neglected their responsibilities. And that's when you have the audit division come in to look at tax returns that show infrequencies or unusual items that are there, or criminal investigation to actually pursue criminal violations of the tax law. All of those working together should hopefully at the end of the day stimulate voluntary compliance, meaning that those who have not met their responsibilities, who see that revenue tax, if they can hire the employees that they need, can provide these services, perform these functions, and thereby stimulate the other tax-paying community out there to voluntarily comply.
Thank you, Mr. Pablo. And I think that, yes, you're right. In a perfect world, that's the way that it would work. But again, I've encountered many small business owners and, taxpayers that come in to the Department of Revenue and Tax. They spend a lot of their time, sometimes hours, waiting to speak with people. When they finally get to speak with these tax agents, they're able to discuss however much it is that they owe. And then sometimes, many times, especially in the last few weeks and months, they've had to wait for sometimes hours to be able to pay. And sometimes it's just difficult for them to pay because they have to go back into some filing cabinet and they have to bring their tax documents with them, especially if they owe for several years, and there's not a lot of communication. It sounds like there's an issue internally with communication within the divisions, and they're not talking to each other. And it's just really lucky for some of these people that they have all their documents with them, that they're able to demonstrate that they have in fact paid, and that the amount that DRT is now charging them or asking them to pay is way, way higher than what they actually owe. So, there's a lot of discrepancies there. And then I'm also just really concerned that when we do have people that are ready and willing to pay their taxes, they go to Revenue and Tax, and it seems like we're making it difficult. It should be so easy for us to want to take their money. We want to be able to have those tax revenues coming into the government, as many senators have said. We have real concrete needs in our community. Our hospital, our education system, they've all been outlined before. So I guess my question to you is, why are we making it so difficult for people to pay?
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that up, and you're right. It shouldn't be difficult. And I'm not sure, it could be on a case to case. Maybe this one had a probate, a bankruptcy, something that was going on, or maybe a payment that wasn't posted. And, unfortunately, that does happen. If it's entered in even one wrong number when they're entering it, one wrong number will throw it off. So then they would have to go in the back and do some research. And that's probably why it took a while. But we do try and entertain these customers, taxpayers, as best as possible and as quickly as possible. I think that's important.
Mr. Chair, I'm just curious, did they really stop the charging of the credit card fees? Because that was brought up during the SES meeting and the tax commission, and DOA and OPA had said that was something they should consider.
You're right.
Have they stopped that yet? Because you're part of the fiscal team.
And no, it hasn't. What happened, I believe they're still at the RFP stage. DOA is handling that. The merchant fee and all that. So I believe they're still on the RFP stage, but it's still ongoing, the fees.
You mean to stop the charging and the government of Guam absorb that cost?
Oh, no.
You need an RFP? When you go up and you run your credit card.
Right.
Because that's what Senator Lee is bringing up, how we can make it more convenient for the people.
That has to come
if you're
from
bringing in 30, 40, 50 million dollars, why would we be concerned about 4?
Yes.
That's what's slowing. A lot of people are turned off or don't want to go pay.
Yes.
They rather run a check or something else, and that's causing a big delay. So I'm just curious if their fiscal team has considered that yet.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. That was stopped by the legislature with the former Ben Pangilinan. So that law stopped the government from paying that fee. So then it went out to the private vendor.
All right.
So it has to be changed at this level.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Benito. Just one last question. I know that last fiscal year I raised a concern about the inefficiencies of Guam's IT infrastructure. And Mr. Pablo, you mentioned the Office of Technology, and they'll probably be coming before us in the next few weeks. But I have inquired with both DOA, with Department of Revenue and Tax, about an updating of the AS400, and I was told many, many months ago by the director of DOA at the time, Ms. Balatu, that there were conversations being had with the federal government and that there was a potential for a federal grant through the Department of Interior to help figure out what system would be best to better integrate a better financial system, not just reporting, but one that would allow all the agencies, all the requisite agencies to have better communication and talk to each other and just better bookkeeping and being able to generate the reports that we request so often. And so I wanted to ask if you have any follow-up to that, or, I mean, where is the grant, has the grant been given to us, or where are you in that process?
Okay, I'm sorry. I know that DOA and OTEC is taking the lead on that, so I'm not privy to that information at this time. Perhaps DOA can answer that question? I really don't know where the grant is. They're handling that.
If there's
that function.
somebody at the Department of Revenue and Taxation that is part of these conversations, because it's my understanding that those three agencies were working together, if you could include that in your report back to the speaker, I would appreciate it.
Okay, let me
Thank you, Mrs. Benito and
Okay,
Mr. Pablo.
yes.
I just wanted to comment. Obviously, in listening to all the discussion, it appears that a lot of what we're wrangling over is issues that have to do with the systemic nature of the problems that result in all the shortcomings and the failure to accomplish established goals on your end and our end. And what I want to say is, you know, clearly there's a lot that we can do that needs to be done, but a lot of it is exacerbated by the processes we have within our system. As you were trying to communicate the fact that we are competing with each other. Agencies, autonomous agencies are competing with each other. The pay scales are competing with each other. The technical professional pay scale versus the Hay pay scale versus the law enforcement scale and any others that are out there all compete with each other, and it makes it difficult to recruit, and that I can appreciate. But what I want to just note is we understand that a lot of the gaps in the personnel are contributing to the lack of enforcement and the lack of collections. And the only message I want to impart to you is, as we continue to struggle through this, and we look at better ways to improve the government systems, because that's really what it is. I believe it's a systemic problem with the way the government operates. And as a result of the systemic problems, it just permeates, it's far-reaching, and it doesn't allow for an efficient and effective system of government as we see it now. But I do want to just end by saying, you know, please keep the faith. In my 40 years as an adult, I have had good experiences with DRT. There have been times where sometimes we're chasing down things that take a little more time than is reasonable, but the good faith effort by the personnel has been demonstrated, at least in my experience, in the 40 years of my adult life. And so I want to say, keep up the faith. Sometimes it's you know, we want to, it's maddening, we want to give up, and it doesn't seem like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but I believe there is. And that light at the end of the tunnel is a bigger picture that we are just, collectively are just a part of. But as we look to improve the government system and the government leadership, you know, we'll overcome these obstacles. But I just want to say, keep up the good, you know, keep up. I believe that there is good work there, and I believe that there's good intentions. I do believe that we have gaping holes, though, that we have to try to fill in time, perhaps sooner than later. But I'm coming off of Mother's Day, where my little grandkid said that, you know, Nana, sometimes you say the nice things, and sometimes we just need to add a little bit of sugar when we're really just struggling with the bitterness of reality. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, and well, thank you, Senator Torres. A couple things. You've heard it, right? And I think the members here have already kind of voiced their frustration. I think we all feel it. I know that we're hearing the frustration coming from you as well. Your policy, your operations, there's some kind of disconnect somewhere in terms of having the operations run a lot more smoothly, given the fact that, as the speaker has said, right, that in the past and this present fiscal year, we have given you the resources to take care of what you said you needed to have taken care of. I guess the question, the overall question I have is that we gave Department of Revenue taxation, essentially what you asked for, maybe even a little bit more for fiscal 18. So the overall question to me is, are you on par to receive 100% of that, of what was appropriated to you? If not, then really where are we at? In other words, if we said yes, 14 million goes to you, you know, are we on a projected timeline that by the end of this fiscal year you will have that $14 million to be able to use the way you wanted to use it? Or has the allotment been short? Is this the cash crunch that we're talking about?
Well, this 47 that we're asking, no, the money will be there. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, it is ongoing, the hiring process. And to get back to, if you don't mind, I'd like to let Mr. Speaker know on the 27 positions how we're moving along with it. But we do have interviews scheduled for Tax Investigator 1. One is ongoing today, Compliance Inspector 2. We have pending selection for Compliance Inspector. That's already interview done. It's just the selection is being reviewed. The Revenue Officer, the Revenue Agent has been filled, and the announcement for the motor vehicle and driver's license is coming out shortly. So
okay.
Those are great things.
So, but to answer the question, I guess what I'm gathering is that you do expect the allotment to fully cover what was appropriated by the legislature.
Yes.
So that you will be able to cover the mandates.
Yes.
Okay. It brings me to another issue, because in this presentation, in the sheet that you just gave us, on the very last page, the very last sentence is recognizing the government's financial situation. DRT is compelled to operate within the funding provided and must postpone information technology improvements until funding is made available. And again, you've heard the frustration that we have, right, that DRT is not really directly linked. You might be linked somehow, but you're not really communicating the numbers. You're collecting, they're really not sure what is in fact cash, or I don't know, there's a disconnect somewhere. But if we're not going to provide or postpone any movement in terms of improvement of information technology, right, then what are we funding? I don't get it. I mean, the speaker was going down this list of perhaps contracts that you might have for IT services and whatnot, and yet there is no, there was a mention here that, well, any improvement is going to be postponed because there's not enough funding.
Yes.
Right. Can you just kind of address that? I mean, is there more funding that's needed?
Well, you know, there is a ceiling. Understanding the situation financially, we do want things like the mandatory e-filing. We do want to improve our 1040 e-filing abilities. And I'm hoping that eventually, you know, we can possibly find new funding to do this. But just based on our funding now.
Right, but which is the point I believe that your chairman made, that, and I think all of us are making, is that you are the central collection agency for the entire government.
Yes.
To be able to fund all the various agencies and needs out there. I would imagine that whatever it takes to get you in that prime spot to be able to help everybody else, right, that you would need this information technology improvements. And I believe that you have to at least add that in. It's one of those things that I think is a no-brainer, because even when it comes to the processes that are employed up at Revenue and Taxation, again, I think it was a public auditor who has made it known, and we've all kind of know it, right? There are a lot of manual processes that probably should be technologically improved so that you can reduce the manpower requirements or perhaps make your operation a lot more efficient. And so I have a concern about that whole last statement and perhaps even the quantity within your budget, just because I think technology is what Rev and Tax needs.
Yes, it is. And, you know, OTEC is working with looking at other ways to make these improvements. I believe they're still waiting with other vendors, but funding is important also for the technology to move forward. I agree. And hopefully with if we can move these the funding around, we can possibly find more money for technology.
Well, I think
But
it's
right
important.
now, yeah.
Well, I think right now you're saying if, then we will. I think you should say, yes, we will, and this is what we need. Because again, you are the central collection point for all revenue for this government. And we know that we're being hampered by the new tax law, the federal tax law. We know that there are shortfalls, but please take a relook at your budget. And I know the speaker's going to ask some questions or send you some questions. Please answer those. Yes. And then you might have to reconfigure what you're really asking for. I think you're one of the central important areas of concern here. Because when you start talking about public safety, public health, and education, they can't operate without you being at your maximum efficiency. All right, so please take a look at that. The other question I have is on the last page, and maybe you can explain it. You know, I'm coming up with these totals, but if you add up all the numbers above the total, it doesn't add up. And I need to understand why. I know there probably is, first of all, on the last page under contractual services, the 2019 request is $36,000. You have it, it might be a typo, and just I want you to state it for a fact. You have that under fiscal 2018 is $304,000. And so the variance is $31,000. You know, again, that's a wrong figure. We can know that by basic math.
Yes.
But in the end, there's an increase of 10-point-some% over 2018 of what you're asking for 2019. And so I would imagine that number would probably be 34,000 or something. I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, I'm assuming, but
Probably
please.
be 360.
Or it might be 360.
360.
But again, I think for clarity, we need to make sure, because even if it was 360, that still wouldn't be at 10%, I don't believe. But your numbers are off.
Yes,
right?
I think it's a typo.
Well, but even if I delete that number under contractual services and add all the other numbers, it doesn't come out to near that total. And so I believe you need to relook at some of these numbers. Yes. And I know you said this was prepared back in January, right? Well, we're here in May. We're about ready to go into the budget proceedings of what this legislature is going to give you. I think, again, we need to be a lot more accurate with our numbers, especially coming from rev and tax. Yes. Especially, you deal with numbers all the time. This has got to be a lot tighter. And again, I just want to make sure. I'm not admonishing you. No. I'm just asking you, please take a relook at what you're submitting because your numbers don't add up.
Right. I appreciate that. Yes, we will go over that. I do believe there's a zero missing in here somewhere, but okay, we'll look at that and make the correction.
Well, and again, re-look at all the numbers because when I added it all up, even if I did not take into consideration those numbers under contractual services, it doesn't even come close to, you know, the totals don't come close to what all the subparts are.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. I just want to bring that to your attention. The other thing I need to ask is, under the first page, or the back of the first page, under operations, you have $3.8 million, right? Is that inclusive of rent? Because nowhere else is rent identified. So I have to assume that your rental is included under operations. You have personnel service and you have operations. Yes. Is rent included?
Yes.
under operations?
Yes, sir, it is.
And how much is rent per year over at that building? I mean, I've heard numbers, and I just want to know if your number is going to jive with the number that's been told me.
Yes, almost $1 million.
$1 million.
Yes.
So out of that 3.8, so about 25% goes to rental itself. Okay. And the reason why I asked, because, well, never mind, forget the reason why I asked. Okay, so that would fall under there. All right, but yeah, please take a relook at your numbers. Under the taxpayer service, again, the last line under your taxpayer service, one of your missions is to improve the automated applications via the systems program update. And again, so we're talking automation, and yet at the very last line of this presentation, you're saying, yeah, no, we're not going down that road because we don't have funding.
Right, but the little things that we can fix, we've gotten up the 4868, the automatic extension, that's on our website now. We also have the 1099s that was put in. Can you remember the others? So we do have ongoing,
but
right,
I think,
ongoing improvements.
Right.
But for the big
But I think for the bigger
like,
things, I think you need to start identifying it now because we're in different times. And of course, with what's happening aside from the tax, the new tax code, the federal tax code, we're also going to see, I'm hoping, a surge in revenues by this military realignment and perhaps some of the business that might be coming with it. And we need to be prepared to be able to input as opposed to do this manually.
Yes.
And again, I think
you're right.
For
we need
good
to prepare
foresight,
for that. Yes.
because you are such a central component of this government, you are the main component of this government's revenues, right? You need this, your division, your department, your agency needs to be perhaps the strongest agency, right? To be able to fulfill the missions of not only your mandates, but the mandates of all the others, right? So take a look at it again, please. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Espaldo. And that is what I'm trying to get across, is that though we all, as politicians, say public safety, education, and public health are priority, they will have no money if you don't get the support that you need to collect the money. And so the questions that we're asking in the OTEC and other things has to, you have to address those. And please, I want it clear, this legislature did not prioritize you lower than those. So get it clear and get it in here. And one other thing, I noticed that in option 1 and in option 2, there is no request for reappraisal for the property tax. Is there? There's no request for a reappraisal. If memory serves me right, the last reappraisal was 2013, 2014.
Right.
14.
Right, and we requested last year. However, it was not approved on the $2 million that we requested last year. So,
by us?
Yes,
no.
I believe so.
It was. There was no request.
They didn't. Right. They didn't approve the $2 million.
But it's not in this year's budget.
Right.
And under statute, every 5 years, and if my counting's right, 2019 is the year that the reappraisal ought to be done.
But that was to prepare because we also had to do an RFP to get that going so that by next year they'll be full on, or this year I believe.
This year.
Yes.
So that I note that that's not there. And just so that it's clear and it's public, if I could, this is my letter with 3 pages of questions, at least 50 questions. I want them answered within the next few days, not a month.
Okay.
Senator Ridley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Benito, Mr. Pablo, not to beat a dead horse, but on the last page of your submission to us this morning, you indicate that DRT has many funding requirements and a major investment must be made for the automation of most of the manual processes currently being performed by DRT's employees. So I want to ask you what your plan is for.
Okay.
I mean, how much do you need? What does a major investment mean? What is the plan? Because, many people say failure to plan is a plan to fail. So I want to know how much you need and what it's for.
Okay, thank you. Well, the one that is already being addressed was already in a bill form was the mandatory e-filing. That'll definitely help on the GRT filing.
This sounds like an overall
Yes,
system.
that's one. That's just one of them. That's our wish. And then, of course, getting the 1040A and the 1040s online, so taxpayers can file electronically instead of manual processing. And the last quote we got was possibly, a year or two ago. So I don't know what cost is going to be right now, but I'm assuming if I had to do any upgrade in technology, we're looking at over $500,000. And we can also apply for the grant that'll possibly help us do these. So if I just had
I
to
think
guess,
it would be much, much more than 500,000.
Okay.
And it would be my guess, if I was sitting in your shoes, that I would want to put together an RFP or an IFB to go out there and get a consultant to take a look at our systems and be able to give us an idea of what it would take to get all of these systems upgraded to this new technology. That, I mean, we need to be operating in 2018 and not in 1983.
Yes, and since we first got on board, we've tried several ways, and one of them was the IRS, and they finally gave us, they couldn't, their vendors just wasn't interested in our request to, how you have the TurboTax, and then you have the drop down on what country or what state you want to file. We were thinking just piggyback off the IRS tax preparers, and instead of a state, just
click Guam.
Click Guam, and it'll file directly to us. So that's where we were going with that. But unfortunately, we just got the news that, not just got, but their vendors are not interested. I guess the population is too small. There's not enough income to do that. I'm not sure, but it would have really been easy because we mirrored the tax code.
Okay, well, what I would like to ask is if you could include in the questions that the speaker has given to you guys and in your response back to the committee, if you could please just come back to us with some kind of plan or in what kind of investments you would need to bring us into this new century and really revamp the automation of these manual processes, but an overall IT plan. And maybe that's something that I know that OTEC has been working on with you, but if we don't have a plan to get those things, the ball moving today, chances are we were not going to see any improvements on that score for a year or 2 years out. So please, we want to ask that you submit that to us as well. Senator Smasi.
Sure.
I just want to get one thing clear, Ms. Benito. This last year's budget, was it an itemized budget or was it a lump sum budget? Was the last budget a line item budget or was it a lump sum budget?
The last budget, I think it was...
Well, this current budget that you're operating under for this current year. It was a lump sum budget.
Yes.
And the process that you guys have is after we pass the budget,
right?
Who makes the decision on the distribution of that budget within the department? Within 30 days, are you not required to submit to BBMR how you're going to spend the $13 million that was appropriated to the to revenue taxation? Under the lump sum budget, aren't you the ones that make that decision?
Right, but I just know that whatever request we make goes through BBMR, it gets approved first before we move forward.
Before you send it down here, the budget process, so we do Budget 101 for some people outside.
Yeah, well.
Throughout the month of October and November and December, you guys get your budget together. It gets approved, you get a ceiling from BBMR, and you try to write a budget within that ceiling.
Yes.
And so you did, and it was prepared and it was sent in and submitted to the legislature in January. In January, it comes down to us, and then in March, you guys send out your detailed request. But also when we pass the budget in August or September, you break down that $13 million and you say, we want to use $1 million for rent, this amount for personnel, this for technology, this for this. It's not, we didn't break it down here. We didn't deny you the reevaluation. You made the decisions on how that money was to be spent. So you prioritized it. We just gave you the authorization of $13 million. Spend it the way that you think you should spend it. And you made that decision. So don't say that we denied you the $2 million for the reappraisal, or we denied you the cost for technology advancement. If you had made the decision that you were going to have 40-some vacancies anyway that weren't going to be filled for the year, spend that money in technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to do a couple follow-up questions. We currently have the Amnesty program in place for the tax collections. How much have we brought in from that so far? If you can.
I'm sorry. I believe the number is almost, and this is just strictly the 10%, so a little close to 300,000, if I remember correctly.
We've only brought in $300,000 from this tax amnesty.
Right. That's just the 10%.
How much longer is the tax amnesty window going to be open?
May 29, I believe.
So just a couple more weeks.
That's just the application process, and then the payment August 6th, the final payment due.
The final payment's due August 6th, and
Yes.
so they're able to set up payment plans as a part of the amnesty program.
Yes, that's available, but more than likely they'll just pay the 10% and then pay the remaining balance before August 6th.
But
So we don't put them on a payment plan unless
Okay.
they want to.
So they can get amnesty payment plan?
No, it's not a payment plan.
So everything needs to be paid in full by
August 6th, correct.
Okay. And so far we're tracking to bring in 300,000 from that?
That's what we received for the 10%.
Are these funds getting credited to the SAR, the Supplemental Appropriation Reserves Fund?
Okay, I'm not sure about that. If the funds are credited to the SAR?
I think they're supposed to be,
Okay.
because these are monies that were not part of the original budget. And so the reason why it's important for us to credit them to the proper fund is because from there we can use it to appropriate for whatever shortfalls we have in the government. My concern is that the monies coming in on the amnesty might be used to offset the $30 million in cuts that we're supposed to have implemented by this government. We haven't passed any bill to make the cuts mandatory. I don't know what the status is on any of those cuts, and I'm just concerned that amnesty might be used to fund those sources rather than to actually realize those cuts. So we really need to make sure that all of the money is credited into the SAR fund, so there's no reallocation of amnesty money to offset what should have been $30 million in cuts that were discussed. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, Mr. Chairman, is just, all the dialogue that we've had today about the fiscal team and what's being said versus what's being done, even under oath, just has me very discouraged and very uncertain as to whether or not there's good faith. And now we have an amnesty program that's been implemented after a tax increase, no mandate for cuts, and I'm just concerned that unless those monies go into the appropriate fund, we may be seeing those monies diverted elsewhere. My other question I wanted to follow up with, Mr. Chairman, is there's been an announcement of a strike force to go after taxes that have been undercollected.
Yes.
What's the status of that?
What that is to go look at the operations between Customs, Revenue Tax, and DOA and find out where we can make improvements on the processes. The most recent, of course, was the tobacco tax. How are we handling that? So right now, we meet at least twice a week, and we're going through that process, and I'm sorry, Customs, CQA is also involved, and we want to improve the processes or what was already implemented that was never followed up. Also, we're looking at having a revenue revenue officer down there to help them collect or identify what's use tax. So what has been going out in the past, we want to make improvements on how we bring in those products.
I wanted to bring this up because if this strike force is identifying, like for example in the tobacco tax, if it's identifying holes that need to be plugged in order to make sure collections going forward are
Correct.
improved,
Yes.
what is the agency going to do about the money that was lost over the years as a result of those holes that were never plugged? Wouldn't those become potential collection opportunities? So for example, we have new revenue coming in on the tobacco tax, about $500,000 a month, $6 million a year. If you go back 10 years, that's $60 million. Is an effort being made to, now that you're finding these holes, to do some forensic accounting to be able to go back and collect what was not properly reported and remitted to the agency?
Okay, we're going to have to review that because there is a statute for unassessed taxes. So there is a statute that we need to look at. But I also understand that, you know, at the port of entry, they've really been diligent with making sure that whatever is coming in is taxed. And they're also getting access to business license businesses, so they know exactly who's a legitimate business and who's not. So nobody can just make a claim, I have a business license. So we're really, you know, cracking down on that and trying to make improvements. But as far as, you know, what was lost in the past, we need to do further research. I don't know if Poe can add to that, but as far as, if it's not assessed, there is a statute. You want to add to that? Okay.
My point is that if this strike force is identifying holes, then those holes aren't just holes going forward, they're holes that were pre-existing. And if they were pre-existing over a number of years,
right,
then the government has every right, depending on what the assessment laws are, but I'm sure there has to be a certain window still to go back a certain number of years.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And we definitely, I remember, as a matter of fact, in my first term, the statute of limitations for business privilege taxes was, I believe, 3 years. We amended it to 3 years, and for income taxes, it's also the same. So if we're finding these holes, you know, we can definitely go back at least 3 years.
Yes.
And, you know, require them to account for it. But I'm just concerned then that if we're doing that while we're also doing an amnesty, we're having a strike force go out and find what's not being paid, but we're also opening a window for them to say, well, we don't need to charge you any fees either because you haven't been paying. So it's just a concern I wanted to raise, Mr. Speaker, about how, you know, we may be allowing the very entities who have not been properly remitting to almost have a get-out-of-jail-free card on the amnesty side. But I would like to emphasize for the agency that if this strike force is identifying these holes, do everything in your power to use your criminal investigative division and your collection agencies, your collection agents, to go back and collect. Because, like for example, tobacco tax, I do not know a single broke tobacco distributor. I don't. They make a ton of money. So if there's holes, we definitely can go back and collect on what hasn't been properly remitted in the past.
Yes, we'll do some research, but yes, thank you. And I know by law it is a 3-year statute. Anything after that, you're right, maybe investigations, but those are all things that we are going to review.
And just to clarify also, there is no statute of limitations for fraud. And so if there was a willful intent to underpay and the agency can do the work to prove that, then we don't even need to worry about whether or not there's a statute of limitations on the assessment. So those are all things that I just want to put on the record, because
yes,
if we can go back and collect tens of millions of dollars in just tobacco taxes, that's tens of millions more into the Healthy Futures Fund, a portion of which goes directly to GMH. And that just brings us full circle as to how these collections are so critical to whether or not we're going to be evaluating tax policy and whether or not that tax policy makes sense in line of the fact that our collections are what they are currently. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, just one last thing. And just to clarify, Ms. Benito, concerning the tax amnesty, you stated that $300,000 was collected, but on the 10% basis. And so just to make sure I understand that correctly, we're actually looking at the potential collection of $3 million, because if we're only working with $300,000 at this moment and it's only 10%, then right now really we're looking at an extra $3 million that may be coming in just based on this. And we're hoping that it'll even be more because the application process ends by the end of the month. The other thing I just want to note on this process, I know it was in the news. You might want to re-emphasize it one more time for those who may have forgotten or, again, slips their mind, but you might want to emphasize and work with some kind of media outlet, right, or and whatnot, put it out there, right? You have X amount of days that come in to qualify for this amnesty, just to make sure people haven't forgotten.
Yes, thank you. Yes, the reminder about the amnesty, we do have plans to do that.
All right.
Thanks.
Good enough.
You.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just one thing. Maybe I misheard it because everybody else seems to have heard. How much have you collected? 30? I thought you said 30,000.
Close to 300,000?
Collected. Oh, okay. I'm
yes,
sorry.
so far. But
all right, good.
yeah, that's a give or take
And
number.
as it relates to the notification for amnesty, it would seem to me that you have addresses and contacts for everybody that's currently on a payment plan.
Correct.
If you sent them a notice,
yes.
that's a ready set of notice, and you have, according to the list you gave us, over $100 million worth of people that owe you money with numbers. If you could collect from them,
Right. What's known, yes. What's already in our caseload, yes.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
All right. If there's no further questions, thank you very much, and get those answered to me like ASAP.
All right.
And we stand in recess until 2 o'clock to hear from Department of Labor and Bureau of Statistics and Plans.